If you are here, you have taken an active role in bettering your life, no matter what stage of life you are in. The Banyan Treatment Center's podcast will discuss many topics like recovery, addiction, self-help, mental health, and so much more. It will provide you with tools to succeed, ideas for recovering, and how-tos on creating a better life. My name is Alyssa, and today's episode is about binge drinking and the side effects of it. Today on our panel, we have Savannah Deiser, licensed clinical social worker and clinical supervisor of behavioral health at the Palm Beaches. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I am, as you said, a social worker. I've been working in mental health and addiction for the last few years now, since finishing up my Master of Social Work and getting my licensure. This really is my passion, is this field. And I've worked in all different levels of care, all different philosophies of addiction treatment and mental health treatment. And I really am fairly new here at Banyan, and I'm loving kind of the way we do things here. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Celebrated on March 17th, people all over the world take part in St. Patrick's Day festivities. Besides drinking green beer, it is commonly associated with excessive drinking rituals known as binge drinking. Binge drinking is classified as drinking 5 or more alcoholic drinks within 2 hours for men and 4 or more for women. Shockingly, binge drinking is the most common, expensive, and life-threatening pattern of alcohol abuse in the United States. Every year, more than half of the 88,000 alcohol-related deaths, including car crashes, alcohol poisoning, and suicide, are caused by binge drinking. Although people are aware of the problems associated with binge drinking, they may be unaware of the short-term and long-term effects of binge drinking. Even if it is something you do for only on special occasions like St. Patrick's Day, binge drinking could very well be the last decision that you make. Listen in as we discuss this topic of binge drinking, especially considering the upcoming St. Patrick's Day holiday. So, Savannah, how common is it that you see binge drinking to be a problem? You know, especially with the patients here. I'm sure you hear of this a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very common. You went over some of the statistics for the country, and certainly I'd say that's probably pretty reflected here at BHOP. It's, you know, I believe that treatment is really a microcosm of our society. And so it's probably just around those same numbers, that about 1 in 6 presentation. It may not be their whole presentation, but very often it's something that comes up, especially with those obviously here for alcohol use or for other substance uses.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I mean, you also see in this country that a lot of people start off their, use journey as a young teenager, and young teenagers binge drink a lot.
Yeah, that's really the demographic, is that binge drinking really most often happens in ages 18 to like 34, 35. So it is younger folks, especially men. It's not that it's only men, but primarily young men are where we're seeing binge drinking, really take off. And I think that is somewhat of a cultural thing with, folks that do go to college. Yeah. It's a big part of college culture is to binge drink. And some kids go to college when they're 17 years old, 18 years old, and they hit the ground running with this.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is, when do people binge drink the most? But we're kind of answering it right now, right? College, other holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. That's at least in the research that I've seen, and just anecdotally working in treatment, that's what I hear. It's weddings, it's holidays, it's anniversaries, it's birthdays, it's special events. For some folks, it doesn't really matter what day it is, but a lot of the time, the average binge drinker is drinking kind of on these special events. We do see a bit of a dip in the binge drinking behaviors due to these kind of cultural what's the word I'm looking for? These cultural events like Dry January, Sober October. We've seen kind of this uptick in normalized sobriety, which is very interesting and very cool to see, actually. So there are certain parts of the year, also the beginning of the year in general, with New Year's resolutions and things of that nature. Very often binge drinking sometimes sees a little bit of a dip, but it does pick up really throughout the year, especially during the holidays or during holidays like St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you bring up the fact that, it's becoming more common that people are doing dry months or they're practicing sobriety, even if it's not a permanent thing, because you're seeing more and more also these non-alcoholic beverages coming out and, celebrities endorsing them and celebrities owning them sometimes, which I really love as a recovery advocate. because it just goes to show that the work that we're doing, trying to destigmatize addiction and mental health conditions, it's working.
Absolutely. And that very often that's what I heard, from patients or from folks in recovery is, I just need something in my hands. Or it becomes almost just this fixation almost. I just need something at the party or at the dinner or whatever else. And so having those alcohol-free options really helps out a lot of folks, especially when they're early in recovery and it's hard to be in environments like restaurants, parties, things of that nature. So I agree.
You see it as well in restaurants, for example. If you don't drink alcohol, what are you limited to? Soda?
Yep.
And that doesn't always feel very pleasant as an adult to be ordering a soda or a Shirley Temple as your only option because you're not a child anymore. So a lot of restaurants come out with mocktails on the menus, or, you could really get any alcoholic beverage as a mocktail if you really wanted to. And I think that's a really nice option for people if they feel like, they have that fixation or they want to be involved in a safe way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always loving a good mocktail menu. I love when restaurants have them because it's also, I know, like, I don't drink, I'm not in recovery, but I also just don't drink. And I always feel a little bad for the waiter because I almost see that like, oh, this is going to be a small check or a cheap table or whatever every time I order my Shirley Temple or my Sprite. And so when there's a mocktail, I love to get a little fancy drink and have my little, pretend to be part of the zeitgeist, the drinking zeitgeist for a lovely little night. I feel like I'm paying it forward to the waiter a little bit too. But yeah, I love that we're seeing more of that with mocktails and things of that nature.
So what are some ways to avoid binge drinking if it's one of those special occasions and, someone typically tends to take it a little too far? Do you have any suggestions?
I'm a big advocate for accountability partners. That's something that I was taught in social work school. It's something that we did with our classmates, our peers, was to hold each other accountable to get our work done. And I think that applies in recovery or even just cutting back effectively too, to have somebody that you know and trust that you can be open with to say, hey, this is where I want to draw the line tonight. I need your help to keep me accountable because obviously once you're under the influence, it's going to be a lot harder to hold yourself accountable.
Right.
There's help out there. People are there to help you. People care about you and probably are comfortable doing that for you. You just have to be willing to kind of reach out and ask for help. Other than that, I think it's about knowing yourself, knowing your limits, being able to know that certain places, certain people, certain events are higher risk for you and maybe avoiding those people, places, and things, as they say, or coming up with some kind of exit plan, exit strategy for those people, places, and things. If my buddy Mike or whatever, I always binge drink with him, maybe talking to him about that.
Yeah.
Maybe not hanging out with Mike on St. Patrick's Day, finding other plans, alternative plans. When you branch out, you find, at least I have found, and a lot of folks I've worked with have found, the world doesn't revolve around drinking the way that maybe you think it does.
Right.
So finding new hobbies, new activities, new people, new places to go can definitely help you cut back if it's something that you're looking to do.
Part of what you said kind of got me thinking, if you set a limit for yourself and you tell your friends, listen, I don't want to take it too far tonight, and you do take it too far consistently, even with setting those limits and boundaries, maybe you should probably look into not drinking at all and seeking outside help because maybe there's a problem, that could be a way of identifying that there's something more to this than just binge drinking.
Yeah. Loss of control is one of the biggest symptoms of true alcoholism, true addiction. So if you're finding that I set these limits and I consistently don't stick to them, that's a pretty big warning sign.
Right. What are some short-term effects of binge drinking?
Well, what's interesting, I was doing some research in preparation for this, and what was really shocking to me is that even one episode of binge drinking can actually cause really, bad impairment on your immune system, which was surprising to me. I actually didn't know that. And binge drinking, as we've talked about, is very common. So it makes me wonder how many folks are walking around with compromised immune systems day to day. But because alcohol obviously has a pretty strong effect on your body, and it does break down your body's ability to fight off colds, infections, things of that nature, you can really do some damage in a very short amount of time. Short-term wise, there's also a pretty strong connection between binge drinking and accidents, like you mentioned earlier, car accidents, accidents involving, unfortunately, fetal alcohol syndrome or sudden infant death syndrome, sexual assault, unintended pregnancy. These things really are very heavily tied to heavy drinking and to binge drinking. Other than that, they can cause, especially in folks that have underlying pancreatic issues, can cause pancreas issues. But that kind of starts to lead into the more long-term effect stuff. But short-term wise, it has a huge social impact on the way that we behave around people when we're under the influence that heavily.
Yeah, the behavior effect.
Absolutely.
It's not even just about putting the alcohol in your body. It's about the situation that you're putting yourself in, the risks that you're opening yourself up to.
Yeah, and the way that alcohol lowers our inhibitions, right?
Yeah.
Things that maybe we wouldn't do, like fight or yell and scream or physically fight with people. It starts to come out a lot more when we're under the influence, especially if we're highly under the influence like we typically are in binge drinking. And that's why we see domestic violence increase and we see intimate partner violence increase, even in relationships where that was never a concern or a problem. When binge drinking enters the picture, some of these things can enter with it.
Yeah. Now, what about the long-term effects?
So long-term, certainly pancreatic issues, liver issues are probably the biggest long-term impacts that can come out of it. There can also be concerns about heart disease, heart conditions, just from, the damage that alcohol puts on your body. High blood pressure, stroke, even memory issues, things of that nature. And binge drinking is tied to certain types of cancer as well, including esophageal, head and neck, liver cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer. So it really is tied, alcohol use in general, but especially binge drinking is tied to a lot of different really serious health issues.
So when should someone seek help for binge drinking? We kind of talked about the warning signs before, but let's go into them a little more.
Ultimately, I think the sooner the better is always going to be safer, right? I would rather be safe than sorry. I would rather reach out for help and find out that, I could have done this on my own than not reach out for help and find out that, oh my gosh, I can't do this on my own and I do need, some more serious professional help. A lot of the time, the behaviors that we see in binge drinking align very closely with mild, moderate, and severe alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
The lines are very blurred there. And what's very striking to me is in the research that they've done about binge drinking, folks that had a genetic predisposition to alcohol use disorder, true brain disease addiction, were more likely to binge drink. Binge drinking was a very big warning sign that somebody would later in life, or not much later in life, develop a true addiction. So even if it's something that, I just do every once in a while or I just do for fun, it is a big, big warning sign for problems to come if you don't take it more seriously.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts in general on St. Patrick's Day?
I come from a European melting pot family of not super specific descent, but we always loved the painting the river green and whatever they do in certain cities and the fun that goes along with it. I've seen some pretty rough stuff binge drinking wise on St. Patrick's Day, especially living in big cities in the past. But going to a really big party school, I saw a lot. That was a huge, huge holiday for, young people to go out and binge drink. It actually has roots in religious and spiritual practices, and it has a lot of meaning for folks of Irish descent. And it's really, unfortunately, become a drinking holiday.
Yeah.
And it's gotten away from kind of what the foundation of that holiday is. So it's unfortunate. We see that with lots of different holidays too, like Cinco de Mayo. I'm trying to think of another one. What's another one? Cinco de Mayo.
New Year's.
Oh, yeah. New Year's. These holidays that are really built around either history, spirituality, or just camaraderie and friendship have become really big DUI days, really big binge drinking days, really big accident days. There are terrible amounts of car accidents on these holidays from people that unfortunately make the choice to drink and drive. So I wish at times that we could get back to the roots a little bit with these holidays like St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I'm sure the first responders love St. Patrick's Day.
Oh my gosh. I bet they pull straws to figure out who's going to work on that holiday.
No, I love that. And, working in treatment also, I know that one of the things that we do practice is allowing the patients to celebrate, maybe some of these triggering holidays in a non-triggering fashion.
Absolutely.
Teaching them that you can still enjoy certain holidays without being wasted.
Yeah, you can have your mocktail,
right? You could still have corned beef hash on St. Patrick's Day. You don't need to have green beer associated with it as well.
Yeah. It's a big misconception that these holidays are only about drinking, or that celebration in general is only about drinking. At least that's what I found when I changed my relationship with drinking. That's what people in my life who have gotten sober have said, is they had this belief that I can't have fun or I can't enjoy my life without drinking being part of it. But as soon as you experiment with that and test that, at least in most of the cases I've heard, people find like, oh, my life really didn't change that much when drinking wasn't part of it. St. Patrick's Day doesn't really change that much when I'm not drinking. I can still go out and have fun with friends, the right kind of friends, hopefully, but I can still go out and have fun. I could still be with family. I can still celebrate the holiday. And maybe this time actually remember it.
Yes, because a common effect of binge drinking is blackouts.
Yes, blackouts, overdoses, whether those are fatal overdoses or not, certainly go hand in hand. And that's where memory issues come from as well. And if you do that enough, that's where the long-term memory issues come from.
Yeah. So what are the steps of someone seeking help?
I think first and foremost, just asking the people you love, the people you trust for help. At least in my eyes, that's what comes first, is opening up to family, opening up to friends, being willing to accept help too, if it comes to you instead of the other way around. Because sometimes our loved ones see things in us that we don't necessarily see in ourselves. They see a problem that we may not see as a problem. So if somebody does come to you saying, I think you need help, maybe being open to that conversation, being open to that introspection. Ideally, of course, if you're able to have that introspection on your own and reach out on your own, that to me is the first step. Further than that, I mean, most treatment centers, at least that I know, have 24/7 admissions lines. People are literally always 24/7, 365 available to help you. And those teams' jobs are to help you figure out what's best for you. If you do just need a detox, if you do need a residential stay, if you need a partial hospitalization stay, there are people and experts out there that are able to assess where you're at and figure out what you need if you don't know. If maybe you're in a financially difficult situation, there are free resources out there, things like AA and Smart Recovery, Al-Anon, NA. There's all sorts of different fellowships, although Al-Anon's for family members. There's all sorts of different fellowships out there to help you get on your feet and help you explore this issue a little deeper for free without having to pay for it. So there is help out there. Even if you feel maybe a little isolated in the issue, there's help out there. You just have to be willing to look for it.
What would be your advice to someone that binge drinks as a form of having fun?
So I'm a big fan of mindfulness. So what I often say is just to be mindful and to be cautious. As we talked about earlier, this is something that can sneak up on you. This is something that is, for many folks, a red flag for much bigger problems to come. So keeping in the front of your mind, even if this is something you feel like, I just do this every once in a while, once a year, a couple times a year, whatever, it can still very much be a warning sign. And having that knowledge up front to know, hey, people that are genetically predisposed for this disease do tend to engage in this behavior I'm engaging in. Maybe I need to keep an eye on that. That's a great start. Just to have that mindfulness and that awareness. Maybe even keeping a log or some kind of journal of the times that you do engage in binge drinking, just to look at it on paper and see, is this actually just a casual thing, or am I doing this more than maybe I realize I am? If we don't take this issue seriously, it will continue to feed into the epidemic of addiction. It will continue to plague this country. So I just encourage folks to be mindful and to really act mindfully.
The idea of keeping a log, because I think for a lot of people, you think it's not that often. And if you actually are writing it down, you could look at that and be like, oh my goodness. Okay,
Absolutely.
maybe I need to take a break from drinking from time to time. I mean, at the end of the day, we know we're not going to stop every teenager in America from binge drinking, but the hope is to make people more aware.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same with, food diaries are the same way. If you do a food diary and you realize I'm eating macaroni and cheese 5 times a week, that's probably not very good for your body. It's the same exact way. If you realize I'm drinking 5 times a week, God forbid, heavily drinking 5 times a week, 7 times a week, you're doing an impact on your body. And we don't think of it in the same way that if we saw that someone was eating cheeseburgers 5 times a week, we'd immediately be like, that's a problem.
Right.
But somebody who has a few glasses of wine 5 nights a week, we kind of don't look at as a problem because they probably keep their life together and they probably keep things going. But there's a lot of underlying damage that could be done there that we're not seeing on the surface. So I think just writing things down, diarying can really help us stay mindful and stay cautious about our behaviors.
Is there anything else you would like to add today?
I guess just help is out there. I always really push that, and I know I've already said it, but addiction or heavy drinking or whatever it is that you're comfortable calling it, it can feel very isolating, and it can feel like I'm in this by myself and nobody else knows what this is like. There are people out there that know what it's like and that really do want to help. So if it's something you even have an inkling about being concerned about, reach out. There are people out there, whether they're in your family, your friend group, or out in the Banyan community or other treatment communities, that really are here to help you. So please don't feel alone if this is something that is a struggle for you, and stay safe this St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Savannah.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember that growth and recovery are possible, and it can all start today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Banyan Treatment Centers, and make sure you're subscribing for notifications of new episodes. And please don't forget to leave us a review. If you or someone you know are struggling, call us today at 888-515-7706. Thanks for joining us today on the Banyan Podcast.